At night, my girlfriend secretly called her family behind my back. She said, "Yeah, I know. I'll go back and agree to the arranged marriage. George, he's just a pathetic simp. I'm only dating him casually. I can dump him anytime." Hearing that, I flew into a rage for about 1 second. Then I let out a faint sigh, turned over, and went back to sleep. After all, everyone knows I'm the most useless simp there is. Rain will fall. Wives will marry someone else. What could I possibly do about something like this? Beg bitterly. Humble myself and ask her to stay. That's what a real simp would do. But me, I'm a fake one. A long time ago, I understood one truth. Everyone despises simps, pretending to be one. That's the advanced strategy. Chapter 01. At 5:30 p.m., I shut down my computer and clocked out right on time. Behind me came the confused voice of a new colleague. Didn't they just notify everyone about a meeting? He's leaving just like that. He's different, an old colleague said meaningfully. The new colleague asked, "Different how?" The other person replied, "If he gets home late, his wife makes him kneel on durian shells." The new colleague was about to burst out laughing, but when he saw the old colleague's serious face, he forced the laughter back down. "And he still hasn't divorced her?" "Shoo." The old colleague lowered his voice. "Him? He's a whipped husband, a total simp." A wave of sighs filled the office, all full of disappointment at my lack of backbone. I strode toward the door, unable to keep the corners of my mouth from rising. Overtime? Not happening. Not even a little. I'm not a whipped husband, but I pretend to be one, and I use it as the perfect excuse to pass the buck. At the company, my persona is that of a whipped husband who has to get home on time every day to cook for his wife. If I'm even a little late, my tantrum-throwing, bad-tempered wife will punish me by making me kneel on durian shells. The next day, I'll even show up at work with slap marks on my face. Whenever people talk about me, they always shake their heads and sigh, their voices filled with pity for a man too spineless to fight back. Thanks to this persona, even my boss speaks to me gently. After all, my life at home is already so miserable that even my enemies would let things go after seeing it. From a certain angle, I've also brought gossip and conversation material to the dull workplace, giving everyone scattered sympathy and kindness somewhere to go. I've provided my colleagues with tremendous stress relief and emotional value. On top of that, unnecessary overtime, business trips, and work dinners automatically skip over me. Even the cafeteria auntie always gives me half again as much meat as everyone else. All I've paid is the occasional hesitant lowering of my head, a hoarse voice heavy with unspeakable suffering, and a carefully concealed sense of cowardice. The return on investment crushes every financial product on the market. Of course, building a persona also requires a certain level of mental discipline. Once, Assistant Chan from the general manager's office was drinking with me and told me he had discovered his girlfriend was cheating on him. I almost blurted out, "Then slap her across the face." But at the last second, I urgently changed it to, "Maybe you didn't do enough for her. Maybe you didn't give her enough sense of security, or the life she wanted." Assistant Chan glared at me through gritted teeth. I lowered my head in shame and mentally slapped myself. That was close. Rule number 1 of pretending to be a simp: keep your acting steady and keep your persona under control. If I keep the act under control, then in everyone else's eyes, I'm just an honest, harmless whipped husband. If I overdo it, I'll look like an obvious fake playing the part. Chapter 02. At 6 p.m., I stepped through the front door right on time. Willow had her back to me and was busy in the kitchen. She was dressed lightly, with an apron loosely tied around her waist, showing off her tiny waist and curvy hips. From the side, her figure shifted with every movement. The sunset streamed in through the window, casting a soft glow over her. I leaned against the doorframe and happily admired the view for a moment. Then I walked up behind her and wrapped my arms around her, saying gently, "Honey, you've worked so hard. You cook for me every day. It really makes my heart ache." Willow turned her head to look at me, and a smile surfaced in those peach blossom eyes of hers, the kind that could make even a dog feel loved. She said, "I made your favorite sweet and sour ribs. Go wash your hands." How should I put it? Willow had no idea that I had become a simp and a whipped husband in everyone else's eyes, and the people at my company had no idea that I wasn't married at all. I didn't even have a wife, but what did it matter? It wasn't like they were ever going to meet. This was the power of information asymmetry. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through my phone when a soft body silently pressed up against me. Willow gathered her long hair and lowered her head. Before long, I had completely lost all sense of heaven and earth. During this period, Willow's attentiveness had become absurdly intense. It was just that whenever those desire-filled eyes looked at me, there was always some complicated emotion I couldn't quite describe. It looked like guilt, and also like reluctance to part. After my mind cleared, Willow gently got up and smiled sweetly at me, but I sighed silently in my heart. Willow was probably going to leave me. 2 years ago, I met her while running along the river at night. She was sitting alone on the railing by the river, staring at the water. I thought she was going to end her life, so I rushed over and hooked my arm around her, knocking her to the ground. I said, "Miss, the world is beautiful. Don't do anything stupid." She climbed up from the ground and looked at me. The wind blew through her long hair, revealing a face so stunning it could topple kingdoms. I froze, completely dazzled. She frowned and said 3 things. I was just enjoying the breeze by the river. "Take your hand off my waist. My ankle is injured because you tackled me." She said she had nowhere to go, so I had no choice but to take her home and let her recover from her injury. And somehow, that stay lasted 2 years. At first, she was aloof, quiet, and barely bothered to acknowledge me. Later, she reluctantly began saying a few words to me. Then came the whispered intimacy, until finally, things became what they were now. All of it depended on me coaxing her every day with sweet words, providing top-tier emotional support, and performing with acting skills polished to perfection. You could say she had basically been fully won over, but not long ago, I accidentally learned that Willow's real identity was actually that of a rich young heiress. She had only run away from home for 2 years because she had fallen out with her family. That day, through the glass, I saw her looking so cold she seemed almost like a stranger. Into the phone, she said, "I know. I'll go back and marry whoever you arrange." "Him? Just someone I casually dated. I can break up with him anytime." "What are you doing? Don't come here. He's just a hopeless simp. If we spell it out, he'll only cling to me even harder. I'll just leave quietly." I silently walked 3 laps around the residential compound. Before I even finished the 3rd lap, I had already figured it out. Our backgrounds were too different. Willow and I could never truly be together, and our feelings for each other weren't deep enough for either of us to fight the world over it. If I were a real simp, I might have begged her bitterly to stay, crying my eyes out and pleading with her not to leave. But I was fake. Adults should make their exits with dignity. Parting on good terms was the proper way to end things. Besides, if I ever fell on hard times in the future, maybe I could still use our old connection to ask her for a small favor. After figuring everything out, I went upstairs and entered the apartment with a bouquet of flowers hidden behind my back. In a doting tone, I called, "Honey, see." This was the benefit of pretending to be a simp. Even when I got dumped, I could take it calmly, without hurting my body, my heart, or my lungs. I could simply deal with the matter as it was. As for Willow, after all, we had spent 2 years together. She probably felt at least a little guilty. These days, she had been finding every possible way to treat me well, every possible way to cook for me, and every possible outfit to satisfy my needs. I knew this was her way of saying goodbye, so I accepted it all without hesitation, enjoying the premium service brought by her guilt with a clear conscience. Rule number 2 of pretending to be a simp: don't get in the way of someone else's guilty conscience. Chapter 03. I took 2 days of annual leave. During the day, we curled up together on the sofa and watched the movies she had always wanted to see. At night, we were endlessly intimate, whispering every sweet word there was to say. Even if we were destined to part, I still wanted to leave myself with one beautiful memory. On the 3rd day, I went back to work. My colleagues crowded around me and told me the news all at once. Martin had been dismissed for taking bribes, and headquarters had parachuted in a new boss. Deputy General Manager Martin loved announcing meetings right before closing time. Now that he was gone, everyone was delighted. That afternoon, Assistant Chan sent a message in the group chat, saying the new boss was treating everyone to a seafood feast tonight, 888 per person. The group chat instantly filled with people kneeling in gratitude and shouting, "Thank you, boss." I wrestled with myself for quite a while. Then I gave up. I couldn't ruin everything over a momentary craving. The persona had to stay steady. Only by staying steady could I win. The next day, I was called into the general manager's office. The young female boss sat behind the desk in a fitted skirt suit, her face cool and distant as she flipped through a document Assistant Chan had given her. When I walked in, she didn't even raise her head. She only said coldly, "You were the only one who didn't attend yesterday's dinner. Is there a reason?" An embarrassed look appeared on my face, and I slowly lowered my head. The room was quiet for 2 seconds. Sure enough, Assistant Chan backed me up from the side. "Boss, his wife has a bad temper and keeps him on a tight leash. I mentioned it briefly to you before. A bad temper." A very soft laugh came from across the desk. "What? Does she actually hit him too?" I lifted my head, already preparing to put on that honest, simple smile I had long since mastered. But then I suddenly narrowed my eyes and hesitated. "I feel like I've seen you somewhere before." Assistant Chan jabbed me hard with his elbow. "George, this really isn't the time to try and get familiar with the boss." I stared at the young woman across from me. Her legs were crossed, and she leaned back in her leather chair. Her red lips were lightly pressed together. Her head tilted slightly, and there was a half smile on her face. That expression, "Anna, little chubby." The words slipped out of my mouth, The corner of Anna's mouth twitched. With mockery on her face, she slowly said, "So you're telling me that George, the great school tyrant who used to throw his weight around and act like he owned the place, has now become a whipped husband, and if he gets home late, his wife makes him kneel as punishment?" My heart sank. It was over. Back then, my nickname had been Overlord George. Our homeroom teacher had put me in charge of the entire class's discipline, and I was unbelievably arrogant. Anna, sitting right in front of me now, happened to be the one I had tormented the most back then, not only because she always ate snacks and passed notes in class, but also because she had once called me a slave-driving boss in one of those notes. One time, after I confiscated her snacks, she had cried and shouted, "George, you're going to regret this. You'll never get a wife in your life, and when the time comes, even if you kneel and beg me to marry you, I still won't say yes." I was speechless. Who would have thought girls could change so much after growing up? The little chubby from back then had transformed into a stunning beauty. Even her voice had become mature and commanding. I adjusted myself quickly. Shock, regret, and emotion flashed across my face one after another. Finally, I shook my head and pulled out a self-mocking smile. That's all in the past. I was young and ignorant back then. All I can say is, well, there's always someone who can bring you to heel. Anna crossed her arms and said nothing. A mocking curve hung at the corner of her lips, and a few words were practically written across her face. "Like hell I believe you." After I came out of the general manager's office, Assistant Chan looked at me with a complicated expression. "George, are you screwed?" Chapter 04. Assistant Chan was right. Someone close to the boss was close to the boss for a reason. His judgment was sharp. For the next while, Anna acted like she had lost her mind. She targeted me at every turn, things that could clearly be synced by email. She insisted I report to her in person at her office. I wasn't supposed to do field work. Yet she forced me to go with her to inspect the factory lines. I was clearly in planning. Yet I was singled out to take meeting minutes. My workload multiplied several times over in an instant. Finally, I couldn't hold back and said, "Don't you have an assistant?" She tilted her head, not even bothering to lift her eyelids, and said, "He's busy." "What? You can't even handle such a small thing?" I clenched my back teeth and ranted wildly in my heart. This was clearly revenge. She was using her position to settle a personal grudge. She really held grudges. All I'd done was confiscate a few bags of her snacks when we were young. Who hadn't had something confiscated as a kid? What pissed me off the most was that her sharp tongue had only gotten worse over the years. Her words were cutting, always hitting me right where it hurt. Several times, she left me speechless, almost making me bristle on the spot. I knew she was deliberately trying to provoke me. Of course I couldn't let her succeed. How could I let the persona I had worked so hard to build collapse at the last second? So I gritted my teeth and swallowed everything down. In front of her, I always looked obedient, submissive, and silently wronged. As for her, she would only tilt her head and glance sideways at me, that faint smile hanging on her face as if she were saying, "Go on, keep acting." Fortunately, when I got home, I still had Willow. That day, Anna called me into her office again to revise a proposal, making me get home 40 minutes late. When I pushed the door open, the table was covered with a full candlelit dinner. Willow was wearing a white dress, smiling at me under the candlelight. "Gio, today is our second anniversary." I smiled and took out the gift I had prepared long ago. "Gio." She flew into my arms like a little bird, wrapping her legs around my waist. I caught her steadily. That night, the moment Willow's eyes went unfocused, she suddenly reached out and wrapped her arms around my neck, pressing herself tightly against me. Her voice trembled as she said, "Gio, what is it?" I answered. She said, "If one day I suddenly left, what would you do?" She pressed her lips together, her breathing suddenly becoming light. In my panic, I blurted out, "I'd wait for you my whole life." Willow looked at me, her eyes shining in the darkness like two little flames. Then she pressed her lips to my ear and sighed softly, as if relieved. "It doesn't have to be that long." That night, we went absolutely wild. The next day at work, my waist ached and my legs were so weak I could barely stand straight. Every now and then, I let out a hiss under my breath. The colleague beside me asked cautiously, "George, did you get punished again yesterday?" I tugged at the corner of my mouth. Let's not talk about it." That sentence drew a wave of complicated looks. My phone rang. Willow had sent me a message. It read, "Gio, I'm leaving for a while. I don't know when I'll be back. Take care." I stared at the screen for a few seconds. The last bit of hope I had been holding onto finally died. I got up and went to the pantry. I made a cup of hot coffee, held it in my hands, and leaned my arms against the counter in a daze. Willow had returned to her original world. She had gone back for her arranged marriage. Of course she wouldn't come back. Those words had only been a delaying tactic to comfort me. The simp. Heh, good thing I wasn't a real simp, so I wouldn't be that sad. I tilted my head back. For a long while, I didn't move. What are you doing during work hours? Posing here like some dramatic duck? A cool voice sounded. I froze and met Anna's eyes. She was leaning against the doorframe with a cup in her hand, her gaze sharp, like a cat that had smelled blood. I closed my eyes for a moment. She narrowed her eyes at me. Are you crying? I pretended to stay calm and said, no. The steam got in my eyes. She gave a cold snort and said sharply, is it really that serious? Are you really that miserable? TCH. George, stop pretending. You might fool others, but you can't fool. She suddenly stopped. Her gaze landed on my face. There was an especially obvious slap mark on my left cheek. It was from last night, when Willow and I got carried away during roleplay, and she left it there while resisting. Anna said in shock. She did that to you? Anna's eyes widened, her face full of disbelief. I looked at her, blank and dazed, like an idiot. I said, it doesn't hurt as long as she can let it out. She won't have to bottle up her feelings. I just want her to be happy. Anna bit her lip and said, oh my God, what are you even saying? What do you mean? Let it out. This is domestic violence. Can you stop being such a simp? I said nothing. I simply turned around and hurried away in a sorry state. Rule 3 of pretending to be a simp: go with the flow and seize every usable opportunity. There will naturally be great scholars to debate the scriptures for me. Chapter 05. When I got home that night, the apartment was very quiet. The rooms had been cleaned until not a speck of dust remained. The plants on the balcony had all been watered, and the fridge was stuffed full. Willow was like some fairy tale house spirit who had suddenly appeared in my life. She had come, and then she had gone. I sat on the sofa for a while, took a deep breath, then got up and took vegetables and meat from the fridge. I put the pan on the stove and heated the oil. A fairy tale helper and an ordinary man were never from the same world to begin with. Life still had to go on. When I went to work the next day, HR suddenly sent out a notice. The end of the workday had been changed to 5 p.m. Overtime was forbidden. Everyone went wild with joy. They cheered one after another. The legendary 9 to 5. I actually get to witness it in my lifetime. No overtime allowed. Am I dreaming? Someone else said, the she-devil boss may have a poisonous tongue, but she actually does decent human things. While I was excited, I also felt a little suspicious. Surely, it couldn't be because of me, right? But whatever. Long live getting off work at 5. Oh yeah. That afternoon, I brought some documents to Anna. Just as I was about to leave, she suddenly murmured, as if talking to herself. Sometimes, only after you bravely step outside do you realize it wasn't raining out there at all. I turned my head and glanced out the window. It is raining, I said. You'd better not go out right now. Her face darkened. With a wave of her hand, she told me to leave. Similar things happened several more times after that. Usually, when I was alone with her, she would suddenly turn into a poetic, melancholic girl and say things like, a wrong love isn't love. It's a swamp of fate. Men should actually open their eyes and see the world. A person can only save themselves. Every time, I would look at her with a complicated expression, and she would look back at me with an equally complicated expression. I thought there was something wrong with her brain. Even if she was trying to give me sincere advice, it was still a little hard to keep a straight face. Fortunately, aside from that, she stopped targeting me. She stopped deliberately piling extra work on me, and her words were no longer as sharp and vicious as before, although the apartment after Willow left was terrifyingly quiet. My days at the company finally started getting better again. Chapter 06. That day, Assistant Chan took leave for personal reasons. Since I had previously coordinated with the factory, I was temporarily assigned to accompany Anna on an inspection of the production line. People were coming and going in the workshop. When 2 movers passed by carrying goods, they accidentally bumped into me. I stumbled, and in an attempt to steady myself, I instinctively grabbed the person beside me. As a result, both of us fell into the maintenance pit next to us. When I came back to my senses, I suddenly realized there was someone underneath me. Anna's eyes were staring straight at me. Her pupils were practically shaking. Only then did I realize that my hands were pressing somewhere they absolutely should not be pressing. I quickly tried to push myself up, but the maintenance pit was only half a meter wide. There was nowhere for my hands to brace against. I had barely lifted myself a little before slipping back down. My hands landed with perfect accuracy again. I hurriedly tried to push myself up once more, then slipped again, several times in a row. Anna's face first turned pale, then flushed red. I thought to myself, this is bad. I had seen that expression before. Once, she picked a fight with me and tried to hit me. After I pinned her down, she looked exactly like this, her face nearly exploding with rage. After struggling for ages, I finally managed to climb out. I quickly reached out to pull her up, but she pushed my hand away and glared at me with a flushed face. I can do it myself. She slowly climbed up, turned around, and arranged her clothes with her back to everyone. Then she suddenly lifted her foot and left. She left. From that day on, Anna's attitude toward me changed again. Whenever we ran into each other in the hallway, she would freeze as if struck by lightning, then turn around and leave. When I went to her for signatures, she kept her head lowered the entire time. From the moment I entered to the moment I left, she refused to look up no matter what. During meetings, I would occasionally glance up by accident and meet her gaze before she had time to look away. That look was extremely complicated. There was shock, there was confusion, and it seemed as though something new inside her was reorganizing itself, taking root, and growing. As for work, in Anna's first quarter after taking office, everyone's bonuses doubled. On bonus day, the whole company was filled with joy. Everyone congratulated each other as if it were New Year. During the day, the company was lively and noisy, but late at night, when everything was quiet, I would occasionally think of Willow. She had been gone for half a year. Once, I accidentally came across an international news clip on my phone. In the video, a woman who looked very much like Willow was wearing a black gown, surrounded by bodyguards and reporters. She was giving a speech. She spoke fluent foreign languages, her expression calm and her tone cool. The news was roughly about the eldest princess of some country's shadowy financial dynasty returning home. I narrowed my eyes and watched for quite a while before confirming that she only looked similar. Willow didn't speak foreign languages. She was a gentle beauty with a fragile, wounded air. She was completely different from the high and mighty, ice-cold heiress in that video. That night, I drank a little. In the end, I couldn't hold back and dialed that familiar number. A loud-voiced man answered the call and said I had the wrong number. This was a number he had just bought. Only then did I realize, to prevent me, the simp, from clinging to her endlessly, she had even changed her number. I washed my face and smiled at myself in the mirror. Then so be it. Rule number 4 of pretending to be a simp. You may occasionally get too immersed in the role, but only once, and only when you're alone. Chapter 07. The company's performance skyrocketed, so it decided to add a new production line. Anna needed to fly to the southwest to inspect and research the source of the raw materials. Assistant Chan came to me, hoping I could take this business trip in his place. Hesitating, he said that his girlfriend had recently been threatening to break up with him, and he was doing everything he could to win her back. He really couldn't leave right now. With a heavy expression, he said, I love her. I really can't live without her. George, other people may not understand me, but you definitely do, right? I know you have your own difficulties too, but you're the only one who can follow up on this work. I really can't find anyone else. I was a little shocked. I never expected that someone as decisive and efficient as him at work could be such a simp in private. Recently, the company had reformed its policies. The business trip allowance had been tripled, and there would be compensatory leave after returning. To be honest, I didn't mind going on a business trip, but when I thought of the way Anna had been avoiding me, I tugged at the corner of my mouth and said, even if I agree, Anna may not necessarily agree. Assistant Chan immediately looked overjoyed. I've already asked her. She agreed. I froze for a moment. She agreed. 3 days later, Anna and I flew to a city in the southwest. After several days of intensive inspections, we quickly completed the preliminary research. However, throughout the entire trip, she barely spoke to me. I didn't mind either. I just did what needed to be done. The day before our return trip, the head of the vendor invited us to visit a local ethnic village. It happened to be during a festival, and the people in the village were singing, laughing, drinking, and dancing. During the celebration, the village chief smiled and offered Anna and me a kind of fruit wine. It tasted sweet and had almost no alcohol flavor. We drank cup after cup. By the time we returned to the hotel that night, Anna was flushed red from the inside out. She was even unsteady on her feet, so I supported her back to her room. When I got close, I realized her body was burning hot, like a blazing flame, and I was another blazing flame. The next morning, I was woken by a phone call. On the phone, the head of the vendor was shouting in a panic. He said the village chief had mistaken us for newlyweds last night and served us the local ancient harmony wine. He kept asking again and again if we were okay. I sat on the bed, staring at the mess on the floor, stunned for a long time. After a long while, I looked beside me with a complicated expression at the woman who was also sitting there in a daze. With difficulty, I asked, "Is this your first time?" Chapter 08. I couldn't understand it. I really couldn't understand it. But last night, she had been suffering badly, and I had been so pent up I was about to explode. In that muddled state, she clung to me as if she had grabbed onto her last lifeline and refused to let go. And so everything happened naturally. At first, the corners of her eyes were red, and her whole body was trembling with nerves. But once she figured things out, she turned the tables and took control. She wanted it again and again. Even when I couldn't take it anymore, she still wouldn't stop. Only after I collapsed from exhaustion and fell asleep did she finally settle down. Thinking of that, I lowered my head and looked again in confusion. It was my first time. Beside me, Anna said those words in a low voice. I shuddered, and even my voice trembled. Anna, you're 28. Have you never dated anyone? Don't tell me you have some kind of purity complex and I ruined you. Anna lowered her head, wrapped in the white blanket as she leaned against the headboard. She looked like a wronged little wife. She didn't speak for a long time. Then suddenly, 2 streams of tears silently rolled down her face. My first reaction was to turn and look out the window. The sun was shining brightly. Yes, it was broad daylight. In the room, her aggrieved voice sounded. All these years, I've never felt moved by any man. I've never fallen for anyone. That's why I never dated or got married. Until that time. She stopped. That time. What time? My curiosity was piqued. She covered her chest and said, when we fell into the maintenance pit, and you were pressing down on me, I realized my heart was beating so fast. I replied, wait, what? We fell into a maintenance pit. Anyone's heart would start racing in that situation. But she looked at me with a flushed face and said, then do you still remember that time at school, when you held me? She said, my heart was beating really fast that time too. I was dumbfounded. What was she talking about? I held her. I had never even touched her back then. The next second, I suddenly remembered, back in school, the last time I confiscated little Chubby's note. She chased after me in a rage to snatch it back. She failed to stop in time and crashed straight into me, knocking me to the ground and landing right on top of me. When I came back to my senses, I saw her lying on my chest with a shy look on her face. I was speechless. She called that a hug. Anna slowly wiped away her tears. When she looked at me again, her expression had become serious and solemn. She said, George, I gave you my first time, both emotionally and physically. In this life, I can only be tied to you now. You have to take responsibility for me. As if remembering something, she frowned slightly, paused, and then said, as for that shrew of a wife at your home, if she wants money, I'll give her money right now. I only have a little over 10 million in savings. If that's not enough, no, that's not necessary. Seeing her words grow more and more outrageous, I quickly cut her off. Her eyes trembled, and she stared at me blankly. Not necessary. Are you saying you want me to be your mistress? I was stunned into silence. What was going on inside this woman's head? She lowered her eyes, her chest rising and falling heavily several times. In the end, she closed her eyes, as if she had made an extremely difficult decision. She said, in any case, I'm already your woman now. If you can't leave your wife right away, I'm willing to wait. During this period, I can go without a proper title, but I have my pride too. You can't make me be your mistress for the rest of my life, right? After saying that, her eyes turned red, looking utterly wronged. I looked at the woman in front of me in utter disbelief. Had this world finally gone insane? Chapter 09. Seeing that I hadn't said anything for so long, her face suddenly turned deathly pale, and her lips trembled slightly. I hissed and quickly fired off 3 sentences in a row. I'm not married. I don't kneel on durian shells. I broke up with her. Then I added, don't cry. I couldn't keep acting anymore. Really, she had stacked way too many buffs. I couldn't keep the act going. Anna froze there. She stared at me blankly. After a long while, she suddenly said in a low voice, wait, I'm going to the bathroom. She silently got out of bed, but forgot that she was still wrapped in the blanket. She fell flat on the floor like a maggot, then climbed back up without saying a word and went straight into the bathroom. A few seconds later, an urgent voice came from inside. She shrieked, Bestie, I'm going to fall in love. Hurry up and teach me how to date. A burst of excited shouting immediately came from the other end. I leaned against the pillow and looked out the window. Spring came earlier in the southwest. The trees had begun to sprout new buds, and the tender green leaves swayed gently in the sunlight. Everything was about to come back to life. By the time we got off the plane, it was already afternoon. Anna still had to rush off to attend an important meeting. When we were about to part ways, she called out to me, George. I turned back and saw her fingers tightly clutching the hem of her clothes. There was a trace of nervousness in her expression. She said, what do you usually like to eat for breakfast? I thought for a moment and said, usually steamed buns, I guess. She lifted her eyes. They were bright and sparkling. With a smile, she said, okay. As I pulled my suitcase toward my apartment complex, scene after scene from last night flashed through my mind. I still felt shocked and amazed. Then I looked up. A sports car was parked ahead, with several men in black suits standing beside it. Willow was wearing a cream-white wool coat with a scarf-like collar. Her left hand was wrapped in gauze as she walked toward me step by step. Geo, I'm back. Chapter 10. In the living room. I stared straight at Willow's left hand and asked in a trembling voice, what happened to your hand? Willow's hands had always been beautiful. Her fingers were slender, fair, and soft. In the past, even if she only got a tiny cut, she would frown and act spoiled with me for ages. But now, that hand was wrapped in thick gauze. Willow instinctively pulled her hand back a little, then curved her eyes at me and said, "It's fine, it doesn't hurt anymore. Don't worry, Gio." Willow's voice was as gentle as before. After that, she lowered her eyes and told me things I had never known before. Willow's mother was Chinese. While traveling abroad, she met Willow's father, the man in control of an underground financial syndicate. After giving birth to Willow, her mother found a chance to escape back to China. Her father hated her mother, and that hatred extended to Willow as well. He threw her into a suburban villa and had servants raise her, barely ever visiting her. After she became an adult, Willow fled back to China to look for her mother. She hid from place to place for several years, until that night by the river, when she met me. She said, "Half a year ago, my father sent people to find me. He said he didn't have much time left, and my uncle was trying to seize power from him. Once my uncle took control, he would wipe me out completely. That was why I was forced to go back and fight him for power under the pretense of an arranged marriage. I'm sorry, George. I didn't mean to hide it from you. I was just afraid something would happen to you too." She pressed her lips together and said, "When I went back, I didn't know if I would come back alive. That was why I left without saying anything. I thought that if I really died, and you saw me as a heartless woman, at least you wouldn't be too sad. Over the past 6 months, I was kidnapped, and I also had accidents. But whenever I thought of you still waiting for me, I never gave up hope. Fortunately, I finally won." She looked at her own hand and said, "Actually, trading one hand for the chance for us to stay together forever is worth it, isn't it?" I stared blankly at Willow. A wave of heat rose into my eyes, but she shook her head and smiled gently at me. "It's all right now, Gio. Everything is over." She leaned closer to me. Suddenly, she paused. Her gaze grew deep and unreadable. Unable to suppress my emotions, I made an excuse and said I was going to the bathroom to wash my face, but in the mirror, I saw several obvious lipstick marks on my neck. They were from last night, when I came out of the bathroom. I saw Willow sitting on the sofa, her head lowered, completely still. I sat down beside her and slowly said, "That day, I heard you on the phone. You said you were only casually dating me, and that you were afraid I would cling to you, so you would leave quietly. I understand now, but back then, I thought." Willow suddenly lifted her head and kissed me. That familiar scent instantly surrounded me, gentle and passionate. It was as if she were confirming something, as if she wanted to make up for the empty half-year all at once. In the end, she leaned against my shoulder and said softly, "Gio, you don't have to explain anything. I don't care about things that are already in the past." That night, we talked for a very, very long time. We talked about what she had gone through, my misunderstanding, and where we would go in the future, what kind of life we would live. Only when sleepiness finally drowned out our voices did we fall deeply asleep. When I woke up the next morning, Willow was nestled in my arms. Seeing that I was awake, she smiled gently at me and said, "Gio, we'll never be apart again, right?" During breakfast, I received a message from Anna on my phone, a photo. She was standing in front of the dining table. In front of her were open food containers, each compartment filled with side dishes she had made herself, paired with several plump white steamed buns. Everything was arranged neatly, steam curling up from them. She said, "George, I didn't know what filling you liked, so I specially made several different kinds. You'll be able to eat them when you come to the company." I looked at the screen for a few seconds and replied, "Sorry, I've changed my mind. I won't be eating breakfast. After this, I'll resign." Chapter 11. Assistant Chan handled my resignation procedures for me. He owed me a favor. When he handed me my proof of resignation, he looked utterly confused. "What kind of curse did you and Anna get hit with on that business trip? One of you suddenly resigns, and the other suddenly turns depressed. I'm going crazy at work now." Anna used to be so sharp-tongued, but now she stares at a bouquet of wilted flowers every day, looking so gloomy she's about to pick up a hoe and go bury flowers like some tragic heroine. I lowered my head and gave a bitter smile. For the next 2 months, I lived a carefree, do-nothing life. Willow still personally cooked for me every day, making all my favorite dishes, just like before, until not long after. My former homeroom teacher called and warmly invited me to attend a class reunion. "George, back then, you were my right-hand man. Other people can skip it, but you have to come." I hesitated for a moment, but still agreed. On the day of the class reunion, Anna was there too. She sat in the corner farthest away from me. When I walked in, she didn't look at me. Only her wineglass paused for a moment before she drained it in one gulp. My buddy Luis had drunk too much. With an arm around my shoulder, he reminisced. "Who would have thought this gorgeous woman was the little chubby from back then? Hey, you knew she had a crush on you at the time, right?" I kept picking up food and eating. "Impossible. You know we had beef back then." She cursed me out behind my back all the time. Although, later on, by some strange twist of fate, We did have a one-night stand, but that came later. Luis clicked his tongue. Are you really that blind? Or are you pretending to be? Back then, she was saying the opposite of what she meant. Couldn't you tell? Did you ever see her bicker with anyone else? Anyone besides you? Oh, right. She even wrote you a love letter. I was shocked. What love letter? That pink stationery, the one you tore up and threw in the trash. My chopstick stopped. Suddenly, I remembered. The last time I confiscated her note, it had indeed been a piece of pink stationery. Back then, when I tore it up. Her lips moved slightly. But she didn't say anything. Chapter 12. By the time the gathering ended, most people had already left. I walked to the door and saw Anna standing sideways beside the steps, looking cold and aloof. Just as I was about to brush past her, she suddenly spoke. What did you mean when you said you regretted it? I turned and looked at her. She was frowning, her eyes lowered, her face pale under the moonlight like some bewitching fairy. She said, was it because of our one-night stand that night? Did it make you think I'm some casual woman? I was startled and quickly glanced around. Fortunately, everyone we knew had already left. She raised her head slightly and looked at me. Or was it because you weren't satisfied with me that night? You thought I didn't know how to cooperate. That's fine. I can watch videos and learn. No, Anna. Shut up. She was silent for 2 seconds, then spoke again. Then was it because the workplace bullying I put you through before made you feel humiliated? I was a little speechless. It wasn't that serious, she said. Then is it because, I said. Because my girlfriend came back. I quickly cut her off to stop her from overanalyzing everything. I simply told her the truth. There was a misunderstanding between me and her before. Now we've cleared everything up. Anna stared at me blankly. Then she suddenly blinked and slowly asked. So if she hadn't come back, you would have been with me, right? I closed my mouth. I definitely couldn't answer that question. No matter how I answered, it would make me look like a jerk. I understand. She took a deep breath. I was stunned. What exactly did she understand this time? She said. Your silence means the answer is yes. Anna's eyes were shockingly bright under the moonlight. She said, you're bound by morality, and by the relationship you had with her first. You can't bear to hurt her, and you can't bear to hurt me either. So you can only choose one. I'm sorry, George. I failed to understand your difficulties. At the end, she lifted a hand and brushed at her eyes, a trace of relief in her voice. I stared at her in shock. This woman was sharp and brilliant at work. So how could her brain automatically run this far off course when it came to this kind of thing? Geo. Someone called me from behind. I turned around. Willow was standing beside the car, her eyes filled with a gentle smile. She didn't rush me. She only waited there quietly. I quickly walked over. Willow threw herself into my arms. At the same time, she lifted her head and slowly looked behind me. The two women's gazes met in the night. I said softly, Willow, let's go home. She asked, is everything over? It's over, she said. Okay, let's go home. As we left, I saw Anna standing straight in the night, motionless. That night, perhaps because of what Luis had said, I dreamed of something from long ago for the first time in ages. I saw little Chubby, the girl who always bickered with me, sitting at her desk and writing that love letter with complete seriousness. My mood felt terrible. Back then, when I caught her, I had only meant to teach her a lesson, but when I saw my name written on it, I thought she was bad-mouthing me again. Not knowing the truth, I tore the letter apart. In the dream, I let out a long, faint sigh, and sighed myself awake. When I opened my eyes, I saw Willow quietly looking at me. She said, you were talking in your sleep. What did I say? She didn't answer. She leaned over and kissed me. Nothing. She spoke softly, just some meaningless words. Chapter 13. To prepare for the company's transformation, Willow and I began attending all kinds of charity auctions. That day, she took a liking to a jadeite bangle, but when the bidding started, someone behind us kept raising their paddle. The price of the bangle was forcibly pushed up to 3 times its original value. Willow gave up on bidding in frustration and complained to me, is that person insane? I immediately echoed her. Exactly. Whoever buys it at this price is an idiot. When the hammer fell, I turned around to look at that idiot. It was actually Anna. She sat there with her chin slightly raised and a cold expression on her face, looking in our direction with open contempt. I was extremely surprised. Willow, however, didn't seem surprised at all. She said, Anna, her family really does have the money to burn. I lowered my head and didn't dare say a word. Even less did I dare ask how she knew Anna. When the auction ended, Willow had something to take care of and stepped away for a moment. I stood by the entrance waiting for her. Anna walked over and spoke in a low voice. At first, I thought the reason we couldn't be together was something personal. But that day, you told me it was because of external circumstances. I thought about it carefully, and I feel I should have a fair chance. Besides, technically speaking, I knew you earlier than she did. The next second, a woman's voice sounded. If we're talking about who came first, then your kindergarten desk mate knew you even earlier. Why don't you go find him? Willow walked over unhurriedly and cut her off. My head buzzed. I thought, it's over, it's over. Anna met Willow's gaze with bright, intense eyes, as if she had long been waiting for this moment of confrontation. She spoke calmly. As long as he isn't married, he's a free man. Everyone has the right to choose freely, just like that bangle. The highest bidder wins. Isn't that right, young Lady Willow? Willow looked at her quietly for a few seconds. Then she suddenly said in a low voice, Gio, my hand feels a little uncomfortable. I immediately grew nervous and carefully supported her arm, asking again and again, it hurts again. Didn't it get much better after the last therapy session? Do you need to see a doctor? Willow leaned lightly against me and smiled softly. It's fine. This already makes it feel much better. As Willow and I walked outside, Anna's face darkened terribly behind us. She said loudly from behind, no matter what, I won't give up. My grip on Willow's hand suddenly tightened. In the car on the way back, I hesitated for a while before saying quietly, I'm sorry. Back then, I thought. Willow's eyes curved into a smile. You didn't know. So you're not to blame. There's no need to apologize for things that already happened in the past. After that, Anna would often appear at various auctions and charity dinners. Sometimes, she would come over and exchange a few passive-aggressive remarks with Willow. Other times, she would simply stand to the side in silence and watch us. I honestly hadn't expected her to be this stubborn. Stubborn like a child who refused to admit defeat no matter what. She would stand there, her posture straight, her eyes rimmed red, clearly fighting, clearly trying to take something by force, yet somehow looking unbearably wronged at the same time. Chapter 14. When Willow went abroad to handle some business, I received Assistant Chan's wedding invitation. I asked, is Anna going? She can't make it. I think her family dragged her overseas. So I went. The wedding was held on an outdoor lawn in the suburbs. I saw many former colleagues there. They came up to me and asked, George, are you still with that wife of yours from before? I gave an awkward smile. Still the same one. Everyone shook their heads helplessly. George really is a top-tier simp. He's beyond saving. The groom was tall and handsome. The bride was graceful and elegant. The two of them looked sweet and affectionate together. I sighed emotionally to Assistant Chan. Back then, you two almost broke up. I didn't expect you to actually win her back. He glanced at me and said calmly, I changed girlfriends. It's not the one from before. I was stunned. You changed. Didn't you say you loved your girlfriend so much you couldn't live without her? He shrugged. I did love her, but after seeing what happens to a simp through you, I gritted my teeth and broke up with her. Looking at it now, thank God I was decisive enough. George, shouldn't you also? Suddenly, a commotion broke out near the entrance. Everyone began whispering. Two absolute beauties just walked in. If I could marry a wife like that, I'd wake up laughing for my dreams. I looked over and froze instantly. Willow and Anna were walking over side by side on their long legs. Willow wore a pair of black silk gloves and walked at an unhurried pace. Anna was dressed in a custom couture gown, her expression cold and aloof. Neither of them looked at the other. My mouth opened slightly. My voice was rough as I asked Willow, who had just walked up to me, why are you here? And why did you two come together? Willow rolled her eyes at Anna. I just got off the plane and thought I'd come find you. As for her, all I can say is what a coincidence. I ran into her at the airport first, then again at the entrance just now, Anna said with sarcastic mockery. Willow, you sure keep a tight watch. Are you that insecure? Willow smiled lightly. Miss Anna, you keep clinging on so persistently. Are you perhaps a little too confident? I pinched the bridge of my nose, not knowing what to do. My colleagues had already completely exploded. One by one, they stared hard at Willow, their eyes practically about to fall out. They said in shock, George, this is the wife you said throws tantrums, has a terrible temper, and makes you kneel on durian shells if you get home late. Are you serious? I silently drank the beverage in my hand. This was not the time to explain. The more I explained, the more passive I would become. After the ceremony ended, everyone sat down for the meal. Willow tilted her head and looked at me, amusement rising in her eyes. Gio, I just found out that you're apparently a whipped husband, and I supposedly make you kneel on durian shells whenever I feel like it. What should we do? I can't bear this bad reputation for nothing. Can I? Tonight. She suddenly raised her hand and touched her neck, then inexplicably looked back. Behind her, Anna was holding a glass of orange juice. She was staring at us without blinking, like some gloomy little demon lurking in the shadows. Among the bride's relatives was a famous online fortune teller. Everyone asked him to read their fortunes, and he generously agreed to every request. When it was my turn, the master narrowed his eyes and said, Your birth chart carries the water element. Today is the 6th day, and the divination shows that whoever cooks fish for you today is very likely to become your future wife. I was just thinking how utterly ridiculous that sounded. Then, at the next table, Anna suddenly stood up and walked toward the prep area without saying a word. I had no idea what was going on. I turned to look at Willow, only to see that she had also stood up. "What are you doing?" I asked blankly. Willow looked at me and said, "Cooking fish." And so, everyone at the wedding that day witnessed this scene. 2 women in haute couture gowns, standing in the kitchen, one on the left and one on the right, aprons tied around their waists, fully focused as they chopped vegetables, made precise cuts, and cooked fish. In the end, each of them made 3 fish dishes. It was considered a tie when all 6 dishes were placed in front of me at the same time. I silently raised my head and stared at the sky for a long, long while. Chapter 15. A few days later, Willow and I attended a fairly high-level art auction. The auction was held at a resort hotel in the mountains. Anna once again intercepted a painting Willow had taken a liking to. As for her stubbornness, I was already completely out of ideas. Anna walked over again and said to me seriously, "George, she can't beat me." Then she cast Willow a mocking glance, lifted her chin, and left. In the parking lot, Willow and I were about to leave when we discovered the car wouldn't start. The next second, before I even had time to react, a sharp, pungent smell hissed out from the air conditioning vent. I instantly passed out. When I woke up, I found myself tied up, with a white cloth stuffed in my mouth. Willow, who was also tied up, was arguing with a bald man. 2 strong, muscular men stood in the corner, both holding weapons. Willow called the bald man uncle. The uncle held a gun, sitting with one leg crossed over the other as he smoked. I was burning with anxiety, but my entire body was weak. In my dazed state, I roughly understood what had happened. After losing the power struggle, her uncle had been arrested and imprisoned by foreign police not long ago. While being transferred between prisons, he escaped, smuggled himself back into the country, and came to take revenge on Willow. When I woke up again, only Willow and I were left in the room. She was calling my name through her tears. When she saw me open my eyes, she immediately let out a breath of relief and said, "Gio, are you okay?" My mouth was stuffed, so I couldn't comfort her. I could only shake my head with difficulty. Willow's hands were tied behind her back, and tears kept streaming down her face. In a low voice, she said, "I was born in darkness. I was never worthy of having light. I shouldn't have been so greedy. Maybe I really was wrong. You being with Anna might have been the life you were always supposed to have." Actually, after I returned to the country back then, I quickly found my biological mother, but she said I disgusted her. She said the sight of me made her feel sick. I thought there wasn't a single person in this world who would love me. That night by the river, I really had meant to jump, but then you suddenly appeared. Gio, you gave me so much love, more than you could ever imagine. Willow poured out every word with aching sincerity, as if she would never get another chance to say them if she didn't say them now. I silently cried, quietly listening to her. Neither of us slept that night. Neither of us knew what we would face the next day. At dawn, the door was gently pushed open, and a figure slipped inside. It wasn't her uncle or his men. It was Anna. She stared at us wide-eyed, froze for a moment, then immediately rushed over. As she untied us, she said, "I waited at the foot of the mountain the whole time and never saw your car come down. I knew something must have happened. I checked every fork in the road one by one, and sure enough, I found this house." Probably because she had inhaled too much of the drug, Willow couldn't recover for the moment. She didn't even have the strength to walk properly. The 3 of us supported one another, and after great effort, we finally managed to move to the car. 2 minutes later, Anna drove Willow and me down the mountain road at full speed. But before we had gone far, the tires let out an ear-piercing screech of friction, and the car could no longer move. Willow said anxiously, "He must have scattered nails around the house in advance. The tires were probably punctured when we drove in. We have no choice but to abandon the car and go on foot." After that, I carried Willow and walked ahead. Anna followed behind. However, very soon, the roar of a car engine came from far away and grew closer and closer. It was about to reach us. On one side was the mountain wall, on the other was a steep slope. There was nowhere for us to escape. If they caught up to us, all 3 of us would die. Anna suddenly stopped in her tracks and said to me, word by word, "George, take Willow and go. Your first child together must be named Hope." After saying that, she turned and got back into the car. She started the engine, and the moment the car chasing us appeared around the bend, she slammed down on the gas and rammed it hard with the rear of her car. Bang! The 2 cars let out a violent crash and plunged down the steep slope together. No one knew how much time had passed. Anna woke up in a daze. Before her mind had fully cleared, she only felt herself lying across someone's back, her body jolting with each step that person took. The next second, that person seemed to finally reach his limit. He staggered, dropped to his knees, and slowly lowered her from his back. Through her blurred vision, she saw George covered in blood, bracing himself against the ground as he gasped heavily. On the other side, Willow's had also leaned in. Her voice was full of indignation as she said, "You think you can use something like this to make my husband never forget you? Dream on." Chapter 16 Extra. In a cafe filled with gentle, flowing music. I was on a blind date with a woman wearing glasses. "Mr. Wong, you just said your monthly salary is only 10,000. To be honest, you're already 28. That income is a bit low. Personally, I still hope to find someone who earns 1 million a year. But since our teacher was so enthusiastic about setting us up, I was willing to meet you and give this a chance." I gave an awkward smile. "Right, sure," she said. "I'm 27 this year, 155 centimeters tall, and I work as an accountant at a company. My monthly salary is 3,000. Of course, I'm preparing for the civil service exam, so I may quit my job in the future. Oh, by the way, how much of your salary do you plan to hand over to me every month after we get married?" I scratched my head. "I haven't really thought that far yet." She frowned. "That won't do. How about this? From now on, you give me your salary card, and I'll give you 200 in spending money every month. If you behave well, I can give you a little more. Also, I'm someone who cares a lot about romantic rituals." "Huh, what are you two doing standing here?" I froze for a moment and turned around. Then I stiffened. Behind me, one on the left and one on the right, stood two women. Willow tilted her head. Anna had a cold expression. Both of them were staring at me. I trembled. 1 month ago, I had sent them both the same message. "I can't give up either of you, so I can only choose to give up love. Don't look for me. From now on, I will cut myself off from all romance and die alone." That very day, I bought a high-speed rail ticket and went back to my hometown. Then I turned off my phone and cut off all contact. At this moment, I rose stiffly to my feet, wanting only to leave this place of trouble as quickly as possible. One woman blocked my way. "Cut yourself off from all romance." I forced out a smile and turned, trying to move backward. The other woman blocked me. "Die alone." The blind date woman frowned and said unhappily, "Who are you two?" "We're on a blind date." Willow and Anna turned to look at her at the same time and said in unison, "His wife." I slowly covered my forehead. "Help." Half a year later, I had just opened my eyes in bed when Willow kissed me, as if she could never get enough, passionate and completely focused. I sighed. Then I said, "Willow, let's break up." Her voice came from below, muffled. She said, "Okay." Spring was a wonderful season. I walked down the road in a cheerful mood, feeling that spring was warm, flowers were blooming, and everything was good. At that moment, I was enjoying the beauty of being single. After all, every month, my precious single life only lasted half a day. That evening, I entered the passcode and opened the apartment door. As soon as I stepped inside, a woman threw herself into my arms, hooked her arms around my neck, and tried to kiss me. I blocked her and said, "Wait." Anna's eyes were red at the corners. "What's wrong?" I smiled and touched her face without realizing it. She leaned her cheek into my palm. I said, "Don't be so impatient. We haven't said what needs to be said yet." Then I spoke. "Anna, let's get back together." She let out a breath, as if she had been holding it in for an entire month. She said, "Okay, husband." There was an uncontrollable tremor in her voice. I smiled in satisfaction. "That's more like it. Look, I brought you a gift." Anna widened her eyes and watched as I took a red rope from my backpack. Her body trembled slightly, just as I tied the final knot. My phone rang. Willow had sent me a message. "Geo, see you in a month." Sigh. How should I put it? I'm a principled simp. There's no way I could simp for two women at the same time. So that day, sitting on the sofa opposite me in the living room, they solemnly proposed a plan to me, taking turns dating me. Afraid that I would refuse, the two of them went back and forth, working together to persuade me for 3 whole hours. In the end, I helplessly lowered my head and sighed softly. "Then let's try it first." The two women looked at each other and finally breathed a sigh of relief. As for me, I kept my head lowered and said nothing. Rule number 5 of pretending to be a simp: always keep your attitude humble, and let the other person convince themselves.